Or EB5 spill down to EB1.
Hey there, welcome back to Visa Vibes. I'm Emily Newman, Managing Partner at Reddy Newman Brown, and today we're going to be talking about the Visa Bulletin, something that every green card applicant should know about. So whether you're very knowledgeable in it and refreshing it every single month to find out what dates are going to come out, or just found out it exists, we're going to break it all down because it does play a central role in determining when you can move forward in your green card process to actually file a green card application, either adjustment of status or the DS-260 at the consulate, and whether you can actually receive your green card and get it approved. And with me, of course, is my co-host, also a partner at Reddy Newman Brown, Stephen Brown.
Hey, thanks for having me, Emily. Yeah, this is a topic, it was actually a fan topic. They had asked kind of how the Visa Bulletin works and all, and I gotta tell you, I remember a meeting my first year practicing, and Rahul Reddy's explaining it, and it's like, this is weird. We got two charts, we got family-based, employment-based, there's diversity visas, it goes forwards, it goes backwards. What does all of it mean? It's a weird thing, but once you understand it, it makes sort of sense, I guess, from a perspective. It was at that time all controlled by this one guy named Charlie. So we're going to talk about what the Visa Bulletin is, what Chart A, Chart B is, spill over, spill across, and then kind of some of the scandals in the Visa Bulletin history, if you will.
Yeah, it was quite scandalous from time to time. So what exactly is the Visa Bulletin? This is a document that's put out by the Department of State every month that basically helps manage the limited supply of green cards so that they're issued in an orderly fashion under the quotas that were set by Congress. There's one chart for family-based applicants, which does not include immediate relatives, spouses of U.S. citizens, children, parents of U.S. citizens, because they're unlimited, right. But all other of the family categories are covered, as well as employment-based categories. And it basically tells applicants when they can file for the green card and when they can actually be approved. And the chart has these different dates on it based on country, based on category, and these dates move one month to the next. So you have to follow it to figure out when you're going to actually receive a green card. So why do we have these caps? Why do we have this Visa Bulletin? It all goes back to 1990. The Immigration Act of 1990 is what set the limit on the number of family-based green cards that are available every year and employment-based green cards. So 1990 is when we had floppy disks, VHS tapes, rotary phones. My family had a set of printed encyclopedias. We went to Blockbuster every Friday night. This was before smartphones, before Wi-Fi, social media, streaming, Alexa.
I still have to use CDs for FOIA.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I mean, we're talking about 35 years ago, and that's kind of set immigration as we know it, because it sets our worldwide caps, for how many green cards are going to be issued each year on the different categories. We've got certain amount of family-based, we've got 140,000 employment-based, and mind you, one of the biggest issues of the Visa Bulletin and the caps is, unlike non-immigrant visas, where if you get the primary gets the H-1B and then there's only 85,000, and their family members don't count to that 85,000, the green card side, the family members count. So 140,000, is really 70,000 family units, not including kids. That's just husband, wife kind of thing. So it's not even modernized for realistic numbers.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about the number of workers getting green cards, it's quite a small number compared to all the green cards that are issued every year, which are closer to 1 million or over 1 million when you include all the different categories. So 140,000, where maybe half, maybe a third actually go to the worker, needs to be a little bit updated. Now, these 140,000 are split into different categories. So 28.6% go to the EB1 category, which is for extraordinary ability, outstanding researchers, multinational managers, executives. EB2 is another 28%. Those are for master's degree holders or people with exceptional ability, national interest
Right.
waiver type people. EB3, another 28%. Those are skilled workers or professionals holding bachelor's degree. EB4 is just 7%. Not a lot of people deal with EB4, but it's some religious workers, some foreign service people, Afghan, Iraqi translators.
I feel like they created the EB4 category as kind of the catch-all. They don't fit EB1, 2, 3. They don't fit EB5. They don't fit family-based. We're just going to put everybody else in EB4.
Yeah, and special immigrant juveniles? Like,
Right,
how
yeah,
is that employment? I don't know.
It's a hodgepodge of criteria that go into EB4.
Yeah, and then the last one is EB5. 7% go to there. This is the employment creation, the $1 million green card. And within that, there's different categories and set-asides.
Yeah, so within that, you have, a certain amount, 32% are reserved. That was created with the RIA in 2022. 20% for rural area, 10% for high unemployment areas, 2% reserved for infrastructure investments. The remaining 68% are unreserved and can go to other categories. The gold card still doesn't exist yet, even though we've sold 1,000 of them. So these are our categories, right? These are our employment-based 1 through 5 categories that exist. And that's where we start, right? It's 140,000. Great. Like that's, a decent amount. It's not modern. It's not a lot. But then our next layer is 7% cap. And this is each country of birth, right? So it doesn't matter your country of citizenship, where you're born, those countries are limited to 7% of the total green cards each year per category. And, okay, maybe that sounds fair. We've got a number that applies to everybody, but is it really? No. You have some countries that are extremely small. I looked today, just out of curiosity going into this, there are 40 countries, approximately, with a smaller population than the city of Houston. They have the same 7% cap as our larger countries, China, India. For the family base, we have Mexico. And so this isn't fair in practice. Maybe when they were drafting, they're like, great, we've picked a number, it applies to everybody. But it doesn't actually do that. So where are we with this? The Cato Institute ran an article, last year that, hey, it's about over 100-year wait for employment-based green cards if you start today and you're from India. But when we take into account mortality rates, it's like 65. And so we've got a cap on the number of green cards available. You have to qualify. Then you have to hope that, okay, my country of birth, where I was physically born, isn't backlogged, and eventually I'll make it through that. The analogy we used in court is that these people are just stuck in the buffet line, and people keep getting in front of you just based off of where they were born. And it could be so much as you were born in one country and then you spent your whole life in another country. You just happened to be born in one country.
Yeah, so supposedly this is meant for diversity purposes, but when we're talking about 14% of all green cards available. I mean, how much are we really diversifying with this small segment?
Yeah.
And why, for employment-based, do we care where someone was born?
And I don't think it's relevant at all. And, for diversity purposes, we have the diversity visa, which is a green card that is from lesser populated, not lesser populated, but less countries that don't get green cards as often. To encourage diversity in the U.S. So why we're still doing it on the employment side, which is wholly irrelevant on where you're born.
Yeah. All right. Now, to make things even more complicated, we have this whole waterfall domino effect that happens between the categories, between family, between employment, between EB1 down to EB4 and up to EB5 and all these things. So let's break that down. So in any given year, if family-based green cards go unused, in the following year, those unused family-based green cards get added to employment-based. So we saw that mainly in October 2020, which we'll talk about a bit. So every year, the 140,000 is not exactly 140,000. Sometimes it's more if there are family green cards from the prior year that went unused. Now, how do those get allocated between the different categories, and with the 7% cap, how does all that work when we have this family-based spillover? So let's say in 1 year, we get 100 extra green cards for employment-based because of the family spillover. Of those 100 green cards, 28 go to EB1, 28 go to EB2, 28 go to EB3, 7 EB4, 7 EB5. And then this also the 7% cap applies to it.
Right.
So we get all these extra green cards that go to these categories, but then if I only get 28 to EB2 and I add the 7% cap on top of that, really I'm only getting 2 for that particular country. So it hasn't been that helpful until we have some later adjustments that we'll talk about again that came with AC 21. So on top of that, so that's going from family-based into employment-based. In employment-based, we have some numbers changing hands if you want to go through that.
Yeah, so, and actually, we wrote this down, and then there's even, within the category, but, so we get to family-based, and we'll start kind of EB4 and EB5 that are unused spill over to EB1. Now, if you have reserved EB5 that aren't used, they go to unreserved EB5, and then they go to EB1. But we'll keep it simple. EB4, EB5 spill down to EB1. Goes back up to the top. Unused EB1 goes to EB2. Unused EB2 goes to EB3, and then it gets wasted, right? If we have unused EB3. And so it, actually has always been this way. And finally, in one of our lawsuits, USCIS produced a graph that now they have online. I'm like, now it makes sense. We've diagrammed this goes here, this goes there. Okay, it makes more sense. But yeah, so 4 or 5 go to 1, 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 3. If they don't use all of EB3, they get wasted. And that's happened before, especially as they slow down processing.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what has helped EB2 stay ahead of EB3 for so many years. Because EB1, these are the cream of the crop, extraordinary ability, outstanding researchers, and then the multinational executives, managers. That's a generally small percentage of the overall immigrant population trying to get their green card. So a lot of times there are not enough EB1 applicants to use up that whole 28.6% of 140,000. Those extra fall down to EB2, and so EB2 is getting much more than the typical 28% of the 140,000 until EB1 started using more and more, and so that number that was spilling down to EB2 got smaller and smaller. Now EB2's come to a crawl, and EB3 is actually sometimes getting ahead of EB2, which was historically not the case. So we've basically, with all of these different cases and movements and, we have this again was started in 1990. By 1997, we started getting a backlog forming. .com boom really brought in a lot of tech workers that were typically on H-1Bs. They're filing primarily through EB2 and EB3. So in early 2000, to address this backlog 25 years ago, Congress was thinking, man, we created the H-1B with a 6-year limit.
That was a hard cap.
Yeah, and what do these people do when they get to 6 years and there's no green card available? Because this backlog is building and building and building. So they created the first of many Band-Aids to try to alleviate that situation. So what did AC 21 do? Number one, it created the spill across option. So now if I have, my EB2 green cards and I have my 7% cap that only India gets 7%, only China gets 7%, but the rest of the world is not using up the rest of that 28.6%, those we're going to waste until AC 21. Congress said, why are we letting these go to waste? How about we give those extra to the most backlogged countries? So they go spill across within the EB2, within the EB3 category to generally India or China because they are the most backlogged. Now, rest of world in EB2 and EB3 has its own backlog, which means there's no spill across happening in EB2 and EB3. So the only people this is really helping right now is EB1, because we have a lot of EB1 availability. So that helps EB1 India mainly, because they're really the ones that have the backlog there.
Yeah, and some of the other things AC21 did, again, this is a Band-Aid solution. And gosh, I mean, now we can't even get Congress to do Band-Aids with immigration. But, you know, the idea was retaining high-skilled workers. We've got them here. They're contributing. They're building these companies, helping build these companies. What do we do to keep them here? We've got a hard 6-year limit on the H-1B. Well, that's where we get the extensions beyond the 6 years. You know, they're AC21 extensions we have. Allows for the extension beyond the 6 years. Depending on where you are in the green card process, you could get a 1-year extension or indefinite 3-year extensions, you know, which is helpful when we talk about this backlog that now hurts everybody. Some countries more than others, of course, but it allows for that. It also laid the foundation for H-4 EAD. DHS, you know, interpreted the statute and said we want to retain high-skilled workers. How can we do that? Well, a lot of times high-skilled workers have high-skilled spouses, right, that are highly educated. We're going to create the H-4 EAD because the idea is if it weren't for the backlog, the spouse would also get a green card. Everybody would be able to work pursuant to the green card. So they try to bridge that gap with the H-4 EAD through regulation in 2015. And then portability. You know, when your I-485 is pending, it could be years. We are talking about a green card. There is scrutiny that gets involved. They think it takes years. And so they allow this portability to change jobs while your 485 is pending after 180 days.
Yeah.
So let me ask, Emily, I mean, we've got a Band-Aid in 2010 years. Congress is like, we've seen it. It's not really working. We're going to try to tweak it a little bit. Haven't done really much yet. Since then, did the Band-Aid work?
Temporarily. I mean, early 2000s, dates became current again. Yeah. They also had recaptured unused visas from prior years, about 130,000 of them, which helped to alleviate the backlogs. We have all these extra green cards. But it didn't last because they didn't actually solve the root of the problem, which is either the number of green cards that we said in 1990 is not enough, or the 7% cap is, unfairly discriminating against people who were born in large population countries. And they have no control over where they were born. They can't change it in any way. So yes, it helped in that we got some new benefits out of it, but we still have people stuck in decades. Now we're facing kids aging out more than ever. And there's still no reasonable path to a green card for many people because it's still a 100-year wait.
Yeah, I mean, this idea was never meant to be a permanent fix. The idea in 2000 was, okay, we're going to have probably another Band-Aid. We just haven't ever gotten there in terms of restructuring our immigration system to account for a more global universe that we're in now.
Yeah, so with all that background, we have somehow every 5 to 8 years, it feels like there's a scandal that happens with the Visa Bulletin. And the July 2007 Visa Bulletin was definitely a big one. So this is after AC-21 went into effect, but the backlogs had built again. And so we were back to, I think, priority dates were stuck prior to 2001 for a very long time. Part of that is because of 245I, which allowed people who had something filed on their behalf before April 2001, who may have been undocumented or entered without inspection. They could pay a $1,000 penalty and receive the green card through the regular processes. But that created a huge number of people that all had April 2001 priority dates. Yep. And so to get over the hill of April 2001 was taking forever. And all of a sudden, July 2007, and this comes out early, the month before in June, EB2, EB3 is current.
Wow. Everyone could file, right?
Yeah. This happened like in the middle of the AILA annual conference. We were at Disney. It was in Orlando. And I had brought the kids with me because they wanted to go to Disney, and my mom was there, my husband was there. And all of a sudden, Raul Reddy, my partner at the time, was like, you need to come back early from this conference. We need to get these cases filed. Like, what happened? And people who had planned on giving presentations at the conference on what to do with retrogression were like, well, there's no retrogression, so I guess I don't need to give a presentation. It was a crazy time. But then July 2nd, 2 days into the month, after the entire month of July, we are hurrying and preparing these 485s because we can't file them early. They have to get there on July 1st or through the end of July. All of a sudden, they say, nope, never mind. They're all unavailable.
So we got everybody's current to there's no more green cards.
Yeah, they just ran out. Supposedly they miscalculated the number of green cards that were available. And so there was just widespread panic, people angry, people were confused, people were just raising this issue, threat of lawsuits. I don't think there were actually any lawsuits filed, but Congress was threatening action, and so they actually reversed course and said, you know what, we screwed up, we're going to let you people file into August 17th because there were like 17 days where we couldn't file because it was unavailable. So they gave us the extra 17 days into August. So great. They realized their mistake. They fixed it. But then because so many people could file, it just made the backlog even worse. And we were waiting months for receipt notices, and it was just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it retrogresses everything, right? Mm-hmm. Because you essentially don't have this throttling of the system. Everybody files no matter where they would have been in the line, and so it creates retrogression, right?
Yeah, and it really highlighted how poor the communication was between Department of State and USCIS, because State Department's the one issuing the Visa Bulletin, USCIS is the one adjudicating the 485s, and they actually can see how many people are in the pipeline, and somehow they did not talk to each other and created this whole mess. So that kind of laid the groundwork for 8 years later, 2015, we decide we're going to create 2 charts to make it more transparent and easier to understand.
Yeah, and so this is one of the oddly confusing things. When you talk to somebody who's not really familiar with the Visa Bulletin, and you talk about Chart A, you talk about Chart B, and they're like, I'm current under one of them, like, where's my green card? So we have 2 charts. Under family-based and employment-based, we have Chart A, which are your final action dates. That is when you are, the term of art is that green card is immediately available. When can the green card be approved on your behalf? And you can get the visa number. And so when we're talking about people who are abroad and when they can file their DS-260, we're looking at, getting the green card under that. And for the people who file 485s in the U.S. Under Chart B, which we'll talk about, getting the green card is based off of Chart A. Chart B, dates of filing, filing dates, so final action dates, filing dates. This lets you file your I-485 early, so a green card isn't immediately available, but they kind of expect that throughout the year we're going to be able to get to it. That was, the intent was about a year, and that allows you to get work authorization, get travel authorization, kick in the AC-21 portability, lock in your child's age, assuming, which chart USCIS is using. Again, assuming that they're going to accept Chart B. And so this lets you get into the waiting room. You've kind of done the paperwork there at the front desk, and now you're going to sit in the waiting room, but the doctor isn't going to see you yet until Chart A.
Yeah, and when they brought this out, they kind of explained it like these 2 charts have always been around. And the State Department has always used the 2 charts. That's how they've always decided when to tell people to submit the DS-260. Because they always are monitoring who's in the pipeline, and they say if you start your process now, they know it's going to take people forever to fill out the DS-260, to upload their civil documents. Well, we couldn't upload back then. We had to mail it to the National Visa Center.
Go get your medical.
Yeah, and so all of that took time, so they would let people start that process early enough based on this filing date chart. And then 2015, they said, we're going to make this publicly available to everyone and let people who are filing adjustment of status in the U.S. use the chart. And so the first time it came out was September 2015 for the October Visa Bulletin, and these filing dates were moved so far forward. Everyone's thinking, oh my gosh, I can actually file my 485. So we all started preparing all this paperwork and getting medical exams, getting the photos ready, and then Department of State says, never mind, we miscalculated the filing date. So they moved it way back again in coordination with USCIS, because I think USCIS said, wait a second, we're not ready to receive all of these 485 applications. You need to fix this. So they came out with a second Visa Bulletin again, moving the filing date backwards so fewer people could file. This time lawsuits were filed. Right. Unfortunately, they did not change it. They didn't reverse that decision. So we were stuck with this other chart. And then we finally find out, every month USCIS is going to tell us if we can use that filing date chart, because they didn't say that. When the October bulletin came out and we see these two charts, there was no explanation saying that we're going to tell you which chart to use every month, and it might change from month to month. So we all thought everybody in the U.S. uses the filing date chart.
Well, it says dates of filing. Right. Like, that makes sense, right? And it's still, like, they're not coordinated. We'll get the Visa Bulletin on day one, and then, like, a day or two later, USCIS will say, oh, yeah, we're going to use this chart. Mm-hmm. And we've kind of gotten a good idea of certain months in the fiscal year. First quarter, second quarter, they might use dates of filing. Third quarter, fourth quarter, they're going to maybe use the final action dates. So they don't overtake, but they announce it every month. And I still don't know why they can't be together on the same day. Yeah. Or Department of State says, we've coordinated with the USCIS, and they'll accept these charts. Yeah. Put it on the Visa Bulletin. And then October 2020, I think this is the reason we were asked to discuss this, is our topic, last episode was travel bans and their impact, and in 2020, COVID, and we're all working at home, and, everybody's staying socially distant, and they've shut down immigrant visa processing, and USCIS is being very slow because everybody's working from home. So even within the U.S., there's very little happening. And late September, and I remember because we kept waiting, like, when is the October 2020 Visa Bulletin coming out? And I feel like it was like September 28th, something like that. We get massive progression for EB2 and EB3 for China and India. All the others were current for the rest of the world. And so everybody has to hurry up and file. Now, to make this even more interesting, they had this I-9444, which was, yes, you're being able to financially support yourself and not be a burden, a public, public charge. And so we were dealing with employment-based cases, which usually, yes, they are subject to the public charge laws. But nobody that is doing employment-based is really a public charge, right? Because there's a job offer, you're getting paid, but we have to submit mortgage documents, tax returns, proof of insurance, in these. And all of it had to be done in October because we had no idea how long, looking at, 2015 and 2007, when are they going to change this? So let's get it in. And then we got November's super late, it's like late October. We get November's like, okay, we can take a breath and we can go into the next month a little bit. So, but to make it even weirder, it wasn't all categories. All this weird dynamic where EB3 is what moved forward in October of 2020 so far ahead. There was a little bit of movement in EB2, but EB3 moved so far ahead, so everybody wants to downgrade. I don't know what Department of State was thinking when they did this, that nobody was going to downgrade. But everybody, we want to downgrade to EB3 because, if you have an EB2, you qualify for an EB3 because EB3 is a lower requirement. And so we were doing I-140s to downgrade. Maybe people were still pending perm. Like, it just created this a lot of confusion. Well, people are already also confused about COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, all these people are filing in EB3 that were previously in EB2. We get these 485s filed, receipt notices. We file these in October, November.
I think we got February.
February. November, December, January, February. We finally started getting receipt notices. And then the I-140s that were downgraded couldn't be filed in premium processing. They were taking a year to process, so people are in limbo hoping their downgrade worked. We'd been telling them all along that downgrade is a thing. Like, it's not new. We've been doing it before. It's just this is the first time in recent history we had that option. But people were very mistrusting, thinking this is not an option. But then, because we took in all these cases, what happened to the dates? Retrogression.
Of course. Yeah, and when I talk to litigation clients, on their 485s, it's really interesting. I filed, October, November 2020. Like, I can automatically start the conversation. I got a basic understanding of what happened. You downgraded in October 2020. Sometime in 2021, EB2 progresses, so all of them transferred their bases back to EB2. We had a theory on how that worked, and we're testing things out. Then, like, months later, USCIS is like, oh yeah, here's where to send these transfer of underlying basis letters to, and the format. And then, like, EB3 progresses again at some point, and then everything's like retrogresses, and so it's been up, forward, backwards, upside down. The Visa Bulletin, every time we do a Facebook and YouTube live, you and Rahul do it weekly. Sometimes I get to fill in. We get the best ratings on that one. But everybody asks, like, what do you think next month's Visa Bulletin is going to do? When do you think I'm going to become current? I have absolutely no idea. Rahul will tell you. If he tells you a date, just assume he's wrong.
Right. Yeah. Like, he's always says that he's the worst at predicting the Visa Bulletin, and I'm the second worst.
Yeah.
Because it's just impossible. We don't know how many people are actually in the pipeline. And then because people have multiple I-140s, it's the same worker. So it's not like every I-140 represents one worker.
Right.
And then we don't know how many family members they have.
No, and exactly. And that number can change today, right? You could have someone has an approved I-140 who's, at Memorial Hermann right now and adding, I guess they would. They're a U.S. citizen for now, right? But, but still, there's so much fluctuation with that number. I don't even know if Department of State has a good calculation.
Yeah. And I think that was part of the reason for the dual charts, because if they let people file early, that would give them more visibility into who's actually in the pipeline and going to move forward. But I don't think it's really turned out as helpful as they thought it was going to.
No, and I know that's a question we get all the time. Could they just make chart B current? Let everybody file 485s? I think it's within their right. Mm-hmm. I mean, it kind of would create a little bit of a mess.
I mean, especially in October when the fiscal year starts, because then, yes, everybody has a green card immediately available because we have not assigned them to anybody. Exactly. We have 140,000. They're available.
Yeah, the analogy we used in some of our court cases challenging some of the policies that we did was there's cereal on the shelf on October 1. Everybody agrees there's cereal on the shelf. 140,000 boxes. Immediately available just means you can grab one. And there's a difference between available and immediately available. I think October 1st, there is wiggle room for them to have more progression in the Visa Bulletin and allow people to take advantage of what they were hoping with portability or getting off non-immigrant visas. So just things to keep in mind that can be done. One quick thought every time I post about the Visa Bulletin, what is USCIS doing? It's not USCIS, it's Department of State.
All right, well, we hope we've enlightened you a little bit on all of the craziness with the Visa Bulletin. And if you have any other topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to reach out to us on our social media. And we hope you found this helpful.